Thank you, Selena, for the introduction. The title of the paper I'm presenting today is Discourses of Development as Markers of National Identity, a Tanzanian Educational Experience. And just to provide somewhat of a context for you, I'm currently in the process of finishing up my PhD project on Tanzanian citizenship education as tool for nation building in a post-socialist era. Contestation of the neoliberal economic paradigm, either through resistance of incorporation of neoliberal ideas and structures, or a space for criticalness and debate. I thought to myself that a contribution on Tanzanian education could maybe have some potential. And at least after having Irene as my next door office neighbor for the past year or so, it had me realize how big of a role economy and ideas of development play in Tanzanian citizenship education and nation building. And writing a draft would at least help me further develop what until then has been had been a sidetrack in my project. And just briefly, we all know that neoliberalism is today the dominant economic paradigm and has been the prevailing model for development since the 1970s. And as an economic ideology, it is heavily market-centered. And I think Stephen puts it brilliantly when he writes, rather than placing the economy at the service of the citizen, neoliberalism has forced workers to service the needs of the market. Citizenship, I don't think there I'm changing slides, perfect. Citizenship in a neoliberal understanding becomes first and foremost a pursuit of personal fulfillment rather than searching for a common good. And this individualization of citizenship is, in my view, one of the key factors behind neoliberalism being commonly recognized as a core contributor to the increasing global inequality, being one of the greatest challenges of our time. Field of development education can be seen as a response to these ongoing global development trends and the increasing inequality we see in the world today. As I've gotten to learn, Ireland has been a leading country in developing the field. And I've looked to Irish Aid's current global citizenship education strategy when defining development education as an educational process which enables people to understand the world around them and to act to transform it. And digging a little bit deeper, with its radical character, development education is committed to students' critical inquiry and action, providing agency to contribute towards justice and equality in the world. And historically, the field has been inspired by educationists from the global south, such as Paulo Freire and Julius Nyerere, with the latter one being crucial to this paper and maybe still having some relevance to the field. So turning to the Tanzanian context, after gaining independence from the British in 1961, Tanzania's founding father and first president, Nyerere, set out to transform Tanzania into the African socialist state he envisioned. In doing this, he considered education as the only capable tool, and since education has been the chief impetus for national development in Tanzania. And two key concerns stood out in the early stages of the Tanzanian nation building, being formation of one unifying national identity, as well as setting the course of development for the young nation through construction of a development discourse. Nyerere solved both these concerns in an overlapping way by incorporating his new development discourse into the Tanzanian national identity. And in Norway, we have this saying, killing two flies in one speck, but I think it's fair to stick to the English version of killing two birds with one stone here. And just to touch briefly on some theory, Francis Fukuyama understands nations in line with Benedict Anderson's famous concept of imagined communities. And he further argues that national identities are formed through four basic processes. The first two being adjustment of political borders and population adjustment through either removing people or eliminating them, are processes concerning the physical composition and adjustment of a nation's population. The remaining two of Fukuyama's processes, being cultural assimilation and identity adjustment, involves the formation of the actual identity and its substance. And these two processes are often carried out through education. And my paper is mainly focusing on these two processes as they have been central to Tanzania's nation building. Yeah, and within Nyerere's African socialism, Nyerere understood freedom, or uhuru in Swahili, as dependent on three key factors. And first, we have umoja, or unity of the people. And to this day, the national motto of Tanzania is uhuru na umoja, or freedom and unity in English. And the second one was ujamaa, being the actual socialist politics of Nyerere. And lastly, maendeleo, or the Swahili term for development. And in the Tanzanian context, maendeleo is inherently connected to development as Nyerere envisioned it in the context of ujamaa and his African socialism. People-centeredness was at the heart of how development was envisioned by Nyerere, and around the term that he had adopted from Swahili, the new national language, Nyerere constructed an understanding of development as being of, for, and by the people. And according to Nyerere, development should be the development of people. As he writes in his seminal essay, Freedom and Development, by developing the people of Tanzania, we are developing Tanzania. And further, the nation's development should be for the whole population, not for the few or an elite. For Tanzania is the people, and the people means everyone. And lastly, development should become about by the people, understanding the nation's development as dependent on loyal contributions from all Tanzanians, illustrated through this quote we see on the bottom of the slide here. So, in summary, equity, unity, and collectivism became central values and principles for development as understood through maendeleo. Maendeleo and development in Tanzania during the country's socialist era did, however, have mixed outcomes. And yes, public education and health services were expanded and contributed to an improved standard of living for many Tanzanians. And ujamaa also promoted community building and a philosophy of African socialism grounded in collectivism and people-centeredness that to this day still holds sway. However, Nyerere's policies failed to deliver the desired results and involved the suffering of inhabitants. More than half of the population were forced to resettle in ujamaa villages, causing dramatical disruption to existing food market systems in the country, and ultimately resulting in famine that cost the lives of many Tanzanians. So the 1970s and early 80s proved challenging for Tanzania and the nation's economy. Key Tanzanian exports experienced a dramatic decline in value, which caused the nation's socialist economy to falter. And also the nation's ambitious development projects of ujamaa and Nyerere's African socialism had, despite the slogan of self-reliance, left the country heavily indebted. And as a result, Tanzanian authorities were eventually forced by the IMF and the World Bank to abandon socialism and adopt a structural adjustment program, causing gradual changes of liberalization, both politically and economically, during the 1980s and 90s. With a new and partly externally defined direction of development, the country saw the introduction of capitalism and multi-party democracy. However, in these times of liberalization, the development discourse of maendeleo endured and proved resistant to the more extreme aspects of neoliberalism. So, when concluding, I argue that the thorough incorporation of maendeleo into Tanzanian national identity through education has contributed to the formation of a Tanzanian nation with a population rooted in values and principles from its socialist past. And Tanzania's shared understanding of development, anchored in their national identity, has proven resistant to influence from neoliberalist ideology. Thus, the formation of identity and national identity in particular through education is a powerful tool in bringing about collective and lasting understandings of development. And in times where our current global challenges demand coordinated efforts of strong collective character in order to be tackled effectively, Tanzanian education could provide one perspective to consider. So I will end my presentation here and leave you with this quote from Nyerere. But all of us as Tanzanians, together we are the people. Our development is our affair, and it is the development of ourselves as people we must dedicate ourselves to. And with that, I say asanteni sana, and thank you all for your attention.